Hi, and welcome to What to Expect When You're Transitioning, Part 1C. If you haven't watched Part 1B, please watch that video first because this is a continuation of Part 1B. This 1B, 1C, 1D were originally one super long video that was way too long to watch. So I have cut it into three parts. So if you watch this part in isolation, you may not catch everything I was hitting on in 1B, but that would be my advice. But here we go into the second part of my answering comments that you made on my previous videos, and thank you very much. So, as I said, my transition ended up round about C/D 18 or so. And I realized my transition had not been about changing who I was, had not been about changing my gender, had not been about talking about changing my gender, or talking about I'd been born in the wrong body, or talking about being whoever I wanted to be, or doing nothing had done nothing to physically transition, but had been something entirely different. And it took me several months to start crystallizing this thinking. And then it took your four comments, prodded by that really simple but amazing question. And actually, I believe life is not about finding the correct answer, because that's kind of easy, but life is about finding the correct question to begin with. Because if you don't have the correct question, you have no hope of finding the correct answer, believe it or not. So when somebody comes up to me and says they have all the answers, I go, how do you know what my questions are to begin with? For me, it's about finding the correct question. And that one question, are you MTF or FTM? And coming up with the answer to that, and then coming up through these four other comments, that two from the side of the spectrum that I went, oh my gosh, they're from the side of the spectrum that I'm not comfortable with, but I kind of more agree. I've learned to agree with their thinking. And two from the side of the spectrum I'm more comfortable with, that I'm like, I don't quite agree with their thinking, but not agree in the way they think and disagree in the way they think, but agree in the way I think and disagree in the way I think. Again, I'm the expert on myself. I'm only saying what I've learned, and what I've learned is absolutely, totally, potentially invalid for everybody else. Because none of you have lived my experiences, and I haven't lived your experiences. So I'm not going to pretend, as I said, to be the expert on you, and please don't pretend to be the expert on me. But anyway, back to the C/D 18, and I've realized it's about accepting who I am in my mind. In fact, I've come to such an acceptance in my mind that, as far as I'm concerned, my preferred pronoun is not he, even though I'm presenting as a he, is not she. Although at times I do present as a she, believe it or not. Usually late at night when it's dark, so it's not very obvious. Or they, which would be a more neutral, non-binary pronoun that could apply in all circumstances. But my preferred pronoun, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I think about myself, is me. Nothing more, nothing less. I think of myself, my preferred pronoun, as me. And when somebody else calls me me, that sounds really strange and creepy. Um, so, in fact, I've learned that as I'm making these videos, that there's only three of us working on these videos, me, myself, and I. And me and myself are all about me, and my, and I end up doing all the work. So there's really only one person doing the work, and they're a bit of a struggle. So, and they take a while to create because I only have a cell phone and cheap video editing software that's free. Um, so, uh, so it was about accepting who I am and accepting that I am me. And I've come to the realization that however anybody wants to pronoun me is good for me as long as you don't use something dehumanizing like it, because that's a pain in the butt and takes a lot of energy for me to overcome the depersonalization of that, and I don't like that one. But if you look at me and you say he, good for you. If you look at me and say she, I'm cool with that too. If you look at me and say they, good for you too, because you know what? You're accepting my humanity, and all three of them encompass a part of who I am, which is me. And back to changing gender is impossible. I've come to realize my gender is between my eyes, actually behind my eyes, I'm sorry, and between my ears. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. But, right, changing gender is impossible because when I was born, the OBGYN said to my mom three things. And this was back in the 1960s, close to 60 years ago, if you can't tell by my appearance that, yeah, I'm looking down at the shotgun barrels that are going to go off in a little over a year. And they're not in two round circles, but they're in the shape of a 6 and 0. And when they go off, confetti's going to spray out, not buckshot, and everybody's going to say happy 60th. But when the OBGYN said those three things to my mom, he looked at my little infant body and looked at one piece of anatomy and said, "It's a boy." The second thing he said was, "Sorry, lady, I only deliver them. I don't explain them." And the third thing he said was, "Once it's delivered, no returns allowed. You delivered it, you keep it." My poor mom. She had to keep me. So anyway, I've realized that changing gender is impossible because my gender was assigned wrong by that OBGYN because he couldn't see what went beyond that little one piece of anatomy. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So bear with me on that. Don't just shut this off because you're going to judge me based on one piece of anatomy. We'll get into that a little bit later in a bit of a Google search I did to make sure. And it's not about the wrong body because I was born with the body I was born with, unfortunately. It's not right. It's not wrong. When I was growing up and I was being treated as a young boy, I wanted to grow up to be Larry Bird, who could shoot the heck out of three-pointers. Guess what? The eyesight ain't there to nail jumpers from the three-point arc. So it's not about we all wish at some point we had bodies that were different than us. Unless, of course, you're somebody like Taylor Swift, who has the body of a superstar homecoming queen. In which case in which case all of us go, you hit the genetic lottery. Good for you. So, otherwise, all of us, I go, yep, maybe I wished I was Larry Bird. Maybe at some point I wished I was Tom Cruise, you know, movie action hero, Mission Impossible, super agent. Nope, not me. So, it's not about wrong body. It's about coming to terms with the fact that our body isn't totally what we want. And maybe some of us have to deal with the fact that our body is more not what we want than others. But there's no such thing in my mind. And I'm not preaching to any one of you. This is what the conclusion I've come to. And it's solely valid for me that I wasn't born in the wrong body. I was given the body that I was given. And as my dad used to say, and the more I repeat this phrase, the more I hope someday I'll believe it. He used to say, what are you thinking? Nobody ever promised you life was going to be fair. Just deal with it. Maybe someday I'll believe that life isn't fair. But yeah, I tend to end up going, not fair, not fair, not fair. I don't have the body I want. But don't all of us do it? And again, talking about the second person who said changing gender is impossible. In my mind, yeah, it is, because the gender I assigned might have been wrong. And let's think about this in terms of the Middle Ages. And in the Middle Ages, the station you were born in was pretty much the station you were assigned to for the rest of your life. It was very much a caste system where if you were born a peasant, you were going to be a peasant for the rest of your life. If you were born a stonemason, you became an apprentice stonemason, and you became a stonemason for the rest of your life. If you were born the third son of a duke, you maybe became a minor noble for the rest of your life. If you were born the first son of the duke, guess what? If you survived, you were going to be the next duke, even if you were the less intelligent than the peasant village idiot. This idea of simply looking at an infant and assigning them at birth what they're going to be, that's kind of seems to me a bit Middle Ages and 10th, 11th century thinking that we've discarded a lot of, and maybe we should discard a little bit more of. I don't know, but that's where I'm going with. And the final thought, that I can be whoever I want to be. I realized throughout life I wanted to be Larry Bird. Sorry. I wanted to be LeBron James and be able to dunk the basketball. Unfortunately, we get back to the urban myth of white men can't jump. And guess what? I'm born white and male, and I can't jump. I'm never even going to be able to touch the net. I'm not going to be LeBron James. No, I can't be whoever I want to be. I can be whoever I am. And the transition process for me changed from changing who I am to accepting who I am. Being from changing gender to accepting the gender that my mind is set to. From accepting the fact that the body I was given is the body I have to deal with. And this gets back to critical thinking that I go back into in the other videos, in dealing with the body and saying the body I have has a heck of a lot of disadvantages if I want to present as female. And being whoever I want to be, no, it's about, the transition was about discovering who I really was. And this gets into, what should I say is the next point of what really is gender all about. And we're going back to gender identity and the mind. So, what are we talking about here? We got to go to I went to a Google search to make sure that I kind of knew what I was talking about on a general sense of chromosomal abnormalities that lead to the intersex condition, because I've encountered a couple people who've been intersex. And when we talk about chromosomal abnormalities that lead to the intersex condition, we're talking about the 23rd chromosome, the gender chromosome. Now, chromosomal abnormalities, most chromosomal abnormalities end up killing the poor fetus because the combination just doesn't work. However, there's a chromosomal abnormality on the 21st chromosome that leads to Down's syndrome. And that's very well documented. And if anybody wants to argue with me, those poor souls who are condemned to Down syndrome are anything other than, I don't know if they're suffering or not. I don't know what they're going through mentally, but I feel really bad for them. And I think most people around the world would feel badly for somebody with Down syndrome, which is a abnormality in the 21st chromosome, well documented by science. There's well documented abnormalities in the 23rd chromosome, the gender chromosome, that lead to conditions known as things such as Klinefelter syndrome, 49, XXXX. I believe from my Google search, I may have the number of X's wrong. Don't quote me on that, but and then things like Turner syndrome. And I actually met somebody with Klinefelter syndrome who'd actually had a DNA test that confirmed it. And that's the same kind of DNA test that convicts rapists of rape and murderers/rapists of murder, rape. And if you want to set all those murderer, rapists, and rapists free because you dispute that science, then dispute the science of Klinefelter syndrome. But it's really there. And Klinefelter syndrome is simply somebody's born with not an XX 23rd chromosome or a female chromosome, or an XY 23rd chromosome, a male chromosome, but an XXY chromosome. And then as I said, there's Turner or Turners, I don't remember if there's an S at the end, and then 49, XXX, or however many. And then there's a few others too that involve people born with a certain number of cells that have XY 23rd chromosomes and XX 23rd chromosomes. Actually, there's a lot of DNA tests out there that prove that there's a small percentage of the population that's not born with standard chromosomal. And not only that, but when I did my little bit of Google research, it reconfirmed to me also that there's individuals who are born, even though they may be born with XX or XY, due to hormonal abnormalities during the pregnancy, their genitalia didn't end up as, how shall we say, I don't want to say abnormal because that sounds really judgmental, but not standard issue. That's I think a very polite way of putting it. Ambiguous. And so, yet the OBGYN at birth, in a lot of areas and in a lot of religions, whatever he says, it's a boy, it's a girl, that's what you are for life. And that's kind of Like, I kind of go, that's kind of middle-aged thinking, believe it or not. That's kind of like 1100, born a peasant, then you're a peasant for life. If you're born a stonemason, or if you're born this actually the son of a stonemason or the son of a carpenter, then you're a stonemason or a carpenter for life. Or if you were born the third son of the local duke, then you were a minor noble or a knight for life. Or if you got lucky, you got married off to some pretty girl from a semi-far away land, and she was the eldest daughter of a count who had no sons, so you got to be the baby daddy of a count. Or if you were really lucky, you got born the first son of the duke, and therefore you got to be duke. It didn't matter if you were more intellectually challenged than three-quarters of the cows out in the pasture. Where you were born was where you were assigned to. That kind of caste thinking that, we kind of threw away with those kind of woke documents known as the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, where we said, you got to be elected based on ability, kind of crazy left-wing concepts that really shouldn't apply today. I'm sorry, I'm going way off track here. But let's get back to my case. We've talked about potential DNA issues with gender, and I've talked a little bit about potential hormonal imbalances during pregnancy that can lead to potentially ambiguous genitalia. Yet when I'm looking at the wrong end of a rifle, not whose barrels are two round holes, but whose barrels are shaped in the numbers 6 and 0. And in slightly over a year, somebody's gonna pull the trigger, and instead of a load of buckshot coming out, a load of confetti is gonna come out, and everybody's gonna shout, "Happy 60th." Or maybe somebody's gonna shout, "Happy 60th." I don't know. I was born back in the 60s. There was no DNA testing. There was no idea of how the hormones could affect pregnancy at all. It was just simply a random OBGYN took one look at my anatomy and then said 3 things to my mom. "It's a boy. Sorry, lady, I can't explain him. I only helped deliver him." And the third thing he said was, "Sorry, ma'am. Once you deliver it, it's yours. No returns allowed." My poor mom, she had to take me home with her. So I was assigned, getting back to the question of, am I male to female or female to male? I was assigned male at birth. I didn't have any choice in the matter. All I did was cry when the OBGYN smacked me on the butt to get me breathing. Because guess what? We don't have really any clue as to what hormones happened during my mom's pregnancy. We know that hormones like estrogen and testosterone do affect a person's thinking. I remember my spouse when she was pregnant. When those hormones were coursing through her body, I could see the changes in thinking at times and the changes in emotions at times. I went through HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I can tell you there's a difference between being on testosterone and being on estrogen with testosterone suppressed. And not only that, but probably 33 to 40% of the female population can probably tell you that there's a difference between premenopause and postmenopause, and that a bit of the population who have something known as testicular cancer and who need to have, to put it politely, the family jewels removed to save their lives. Maybe can tell you a little bit about the effect of diminished testosterone on their thinking. Not only that, but there's other hormones too. There's hormones that come from, I believe, the thyroid gland, and one crazy hormone known as insulin, which I had a sister who was diabetic from age 3 and her pancreas didn't produce insulin. And again, my spouse had to take insulin shots during pregnancy because the pregnancy interfered with her insulin hormone. So, are we saying that simply because, oh my gosh, let me come at this from another way before I get my teeth kicked in. All of these hormones can happen during pregnancy. And we know estrogen and testosterone at least affect our thinking. And I can tell you from my experiences with my sister that when her insulin levels got a little high and reduced her sugar levels, it impacted her thinking too. So these hormones can affect our thinking. How do we know how these changing hormones are affecting that developing fetus's thinking too? How can we say that we know for certain what is going on? Because guess what? Science tells us that the mother's blood goes through the placenta, through the umbilical cord, and mixes with the baby's blood, the fetus's blood, to give the fetus oxygen and nutrients. So guess what? Those hormones are going through the fetus's blood too. In fact, my mother, she never had a DNA test, but a lot of mothers have had DNA tests who've had sons, and the mixing of the blood goes both ways, and mothers who've had a son have some male DNA running through their blood too. Mind-blowing, isn't it? So where are we going here? I have a lot of questions. We have potentially differing sets of chromosome 23s on people that can create non-standard genitalia and potentially other issues. We have varying hormones in the mother's body during pregnancy that obviously flow through her blood. And if you're going to say they're not varying hormones, then are you going to say there's no such thing as pregnancy-related diabetes and sentence all those mothers who need insulin shots during pregnancy to serious health problems? And not only that, but the other hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and possibly progesterone. We know they're in the mother's blood, and we know the mother's blood's mixing with the fetus's blood, because the fetus's blood is also mixing with the mother's blood. What is going on in there? That's my question. And that's where I want to leave this part 1C off right now, as in responding to your comments. I've come up with I've gone on a tangent where I've come up with some questions that I don't know the answers to. And I want to explore a little bit more of these questions as we go off into part 1D. So thank you very much for listening, and share your comments, and please, I'd really appreciate it if you watch part 1D. Take care.